So all those people that like poo-poo machine training really need to rethink their thought process in regards to if hypertrophy is the goal, right? It's like, again, if you don't really give the rat's patootie about movement capabilities, by all means, you better be doing some machine training if hypertrophy is the goal. There's advantages there, right? Muscles don't care how you get the stuff in there. They just respond to a stimulus.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have no coffee in hand, and it is perfect. All right. Man, I'm feeling good. I'm still pretty fired up after yesterday's IFS University call. We had a great call. Went about 90 minutes, so it's a little bit longer than we usually go. The questions were so good. These guys are getting so good. They're using the model to an extensive degree, and they're doing it actually quite well. So it's been really, really fun to see that evolution. If you're not part of IFS University, you are missing out. Okay. So we're going to dig into today's Q&A. This is with Ben, and it's all about powerlifting. So Ben works with a lot of powerlifters, had some great questions. We basically dissected the whole lever pulley concept and why it doesn't really apply to human beings. And then how does this perspective affect how we look at things in powerlifting? So that was really, really fun in industry. But we covered hypertrophy. We talked about arching, scapular position in a bench press, why Arnold's chest is still the best chest that's ever been in bodybuilding. So we covered a lot of ground here with powerlifting. Ben was the last caller of the day, so we actually went long. He was pretty excited about that. I was having a great time. So this is actually a really, really fun call. Please watch it all the way through. I think it's about 26 minutes. But lots of good stuff in there. Thanks to Ben for your participation. If you would like to get on a 15-minute consultation call, go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com, and put 15-minute consultation in the subject line so I do not delete it. Or if you just have a regular old question, go to the same email address, askbillhartman@gmail.com, and leave me a question, and we'll try to address that for you. All right? You guys have a great Tuesday. I will see you tomorrow.
We are rolling. Clock has started. Fire away. Go.
Okay. So based on my current understanding, or from what I currently understand, there are no levers in the body because bones don't touch under normal circumstances.
Good qualifier. Normal circumstances. You are correct.
Yes. And so when bones do touch, bad things tend to happen. So given that information, I'm looking to specifically visualize, because sometimes I have a hard time visualizing things, even though conceptually maybe they come a bit more easily.
Understood.
So for something like the lat or the pec, a lot of people who are in this hypertrophy world where, we're looking to take origin to insertion, line of pull, we're trying to manipulate all those things, axis of rotation. How does the model sort of fit into hypertrophy? And I know you've discussed hypertrophy on sort of the level of your model before, but for something like a single arm lat pull down or just anything with the pecs, those two muscles really, from a visual perspective, look like they're using the rib cage as leverage. And I've heard a lot of people say that the rib cage serves as the fulcrum to that sort of rotation. So I was wondering, from the perspective of your model, how you conceptualize that with fluid movement, because with the rib cage, it's a little bit trickier for me to visualize it rather than talking about something like a knee.
Yeah. I totally get where you come from. So first and foremost, let's talk about the lever issues first. Okay. Mm-hmm. The thing that I think is confusing in regards to the representation is that we still have a lot of cadaver-based anatomy concepts that we use, and it's not that they're not useful. So there are times where that model helps us visualize things and discuss things. So I can still talk that model if we need to make a point, because there are things that we pull against, right, to create a shape change. The thing that you got to recognize, so when you look at like the way that a lat or a pec attaches to the humerus and produces the shape change and the turns that we would talk about, you got to understand that thing is surrounded by water. And that's something that a book can't show you that. In a dry cadaver dissection, can't show you that because dry dead guys do have levers. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's why that model exists, is because, and like I said, it's useful for an understanding of how some of this stuff is produced. But now put a water balloon and then stick all that stuff inside the water balloon. And that's literally, we're creating these fluid shifts. When we're creating areas of density, what we do is we slow the motion down in that area, right? So you have one area of the body that moves faster than the other. And so that's what's producing this relative motion between a segment that is moving and one that appears to not be moving. It's just moving slower. And then we have cancellation out of directions, right? So if I have two sides that can turn in opposition to one another, so they can both internally and externally rotate against one another, right? So if I want to turn left, they both turn in the same direction. If I want to turn right, they both turn in the same direction. If I want to internally rotate, they turn towards each other, they cancel each other out, and my force goes down. If I want to externally rotate, they both turn away from each other and they go up. So now I can see the light bulb going off in your head, right? Now you start to see where this stuff happens. And so what you're doing is, remember, ER and IR are always occurring at the same time, right? So if I'm seeing motion occurring, I have established a field in which I can move. So that's my external rotation field. And then I superimpose the IRs on top of that. Okay. But understand that. Okay. So if you you've done dynamic effort bench presses before, right?
Sure.
Okay. So that's really fast.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you've done a max effort bench press before, right? Okay.
Yeah.
One moves faster.
Which one?
Which one's faster?
Is this a trick question?
No, I'm just stating the obvious for everybody that's going to learn something from your question, because this is really good. Go ahead.
Yeah, the dynamic effort should be fast.
Right. Percentage of 1 RM for your dynamic effort bench press falls within what range?
Like anywhere from 40 to 60 with accommodating resistance.
Awesome. Okay. So it's not max effort. So we go max effort bench presses and we're talking like 85, 90, 95, 95%, right? And it's much, much slower, which means that the amount of ER that I'm actually demonstrating in my max effort bench press is actually a lot less than my dynamic effort, because one, I can't demonstrate velocity at IR, right? Because IR slows time down, right? It literally limits the field in which I can move. And so whenever I'm doing IR, I am actually slower than I am with ER, because ER expands and that's velocity. IR compresses and that's force production with a sacrifice of the velocity. So now I've got these two demonstrations of ER and IR, which means that because I'm compressed, there is just less movement. If there's less movement, I have a smaller field in which I can move. And because of the forces that are applied, it will always be slower because it's more IR. IR slows things down. ER speeds things up. Okay. So if I have something that appears to be a fulcrum, okay.
Yep.
It's just an area that's moving slower than the other part. Okay. Case in point, bicycle wheel.
Yep.
Got it? Okay. Bicycle wheel, the center is the hub, and then the wheels around the outside, and the spokes connect the hub to the wheel. Okay. So as the bicycle wheel is spinning, the hub is turning slower than the outside, because if I put a point on the wheel and a point on the hub, they both have to come around at the same point at the same time. So if I'm following one spoke, that spoke goes around based on whatever velocity the wheel is spinning, but the wheel has to spin faster because it's got to cover more distance in the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
You see it?
Yep.
Okay. The hub's still moving. The hub is still moving. It's just moving slower. You see it? Yep. So if I'm doing a heavy press and somebody says, well, you got a fulcrum here. It's just moving slower relative to the extremity that I can visualize. You see it?
Yeah. So even in something like a max effort bench,
go ahead. You're going to say it. Go ahead. I want you to say it.
Yeah. So that's like, you need the ER field somewhere.
Yes.
So you get it with the grip width.
Sure.
You could.
It's part of it. It's part of it because it creates an orientation for me, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
even if my humerus is flexing, traditionally flexing and adducting, and my rib cage doesn't appear to be moving, the rib cage is still moving, but it's moving at an even slower rate than my arm is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
1,000%. You totally get it. You totally get it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So visually, it's very hard to see that, but that's what we know is, yeah. Okay.
See, and if you can understand that, then everything starts to fall into, like, you've heard me say the word coherent probably a gajillion times on videos and in discussions and stuff like that. It's like we have to have this coherence. It's like the minute we start to have levers, bad things really, the amount of heat that is produced that's associated with that would be so destructive to tissues. And I get to speak from experience here because I have bionic hips, right? And so I paid the price for having a lever, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And when the lever hits, it goes fast, like really fast. Okay. Yeah. It's fun. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's not fun. But see, this is a really good question because, again, it's like as soon as I read your email, I knew exactly where we were going to go with this because it's difficult to visualize. But again, the representation of the lever system is okay because it guides us and it creates an analogy for comparison. So now you're in your head, you can have a discussion with a guy that says you have this lever, this lever, this lever, and you go, it's kind of like that, but, right? Yep. That's the goal. The goal is to be able to speak both languages because traditionally speaking, that's where we have to come from, right? But it doesn't provide us the solution that we want. It's the limit of that model. And then it becomes interference because when we start talking about levers, then we start talking about the math that's associated with it. And we get these ridiculous force outputs that they go, well, you have, here you go. I don't quote me on the math on this one, but it's an example from Graham Scar. If you had like a 2 kilogram fish on the end of a 3 meter fishing pole, I believe that there's like a 600 kilogram load on the lumbar spine, but the tissue tolerance is only 400 kilograms. It's like, so how is that even possible, right? It's like, that's the kind of math that you get. It's like, well, the forces exceed the tissue tolerance, and well, why doesn't your back explode? Well, because that's not how it works. Like the model is okay for us to kind of visualize and kind of guide us on certain things. But again, it doesn't, pardon the pun, it doesn't hold water.
Yep.
Right. Okay. We got 4 minutes. You got something else?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Fire away. Let's go.
So then how would this apply to, let's say, the discussion around, like, if I flex my biceps to 90 degrees, right?
Can I stop you? Let's speak.
Yes.
We can't flex a bicep.
If I flex my biceps and my elbow flexes,
if
I contract my biceps and my elbow flexes.
I got you, didn't
I arrived. Yeah, you did.
Okay,
at 90 degrees.
Yes.
If we use the lever pulley system, we say this is a 90-degree angle, or what visually appears to be that.
Sure.
So the biceps has maximal leverage in that mid-length position.
Yeah.
Right. So how does this sort of connect with using, let's say, like using the hypertrophy-based intent of stopping, let's say, like a curl here, right? Because that's the point of maximum peak output of that specific muscle.
Okay. So
does it just not apply?
Well, once again, it's like we can use that perspective, but let's also consider a couple of things. What would need to happen? So if I'm trying to create a signal to create the adaptation, which is the hypertrophy, right? So I have to produce enough trauma to that area, right? So how do I do that? I have to create a lack of movement elsewhere, right? To allow that one movement to occur in such an isolated area, right? So the area of emphasis, right? Where the load has the impact to create that signal, right? So you say, so based on what you gave me as the representation, anytime that elbow is at 90 degrees under load, it's producing its maximum force, right? But
Sure.
It's not. Put your elbow behind your body and put your elbow at 90 degrees. You ever do curls back there?
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. Why? Because you distributed the relative motion, right? Which reduces force production. So now we're back to ERs and IRs, stopping motion. So I have to slow everything down everywhere else and let the velocity occur at the elbow to create an area of emphasis of load on tissue to get the tissue to respond in the appropriate manner. Okay. If you wanted to build the world's biggest chest, okay, so we're talking like Schwarzenegger level pecs.
Sure.
Right? He still has the best chest. He still has the best chest that's ever been. Okay.
I agree.
Anyway, so how do you do that? Do you put them on a Swiss ball with dumbbells? And you say, Arnold, I'm going to put you in this unstable atmosphere where you have to try to manage yourself in space, or do you lay them down on a flat bench that's very, very stable, stops motion from occurring so I can actually produce motion in another direction and then create an area of emphasis of the movement. So that's where the stimulus occurs.
Right.
You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all those people that like poo-poo machine training really need to rethink their thought process in regards to if hypertrophy is the goal, right? It's like, again, if you don't really give a rat's patootie about movement capabilities, by all means, you better be doing some machine training if hypertrophy is the goal. There's advantages there, right? Muscles don't care how you get the stuff in there. They just respond to a stimulus. So a machine-based activity where I would have an artificial stability gives me an IR advantage because it stops motion from occurring. It helps me to stop movement, right?
Right. And so this is how this relates to the first discussion, which was the max effort bench becomes more IR because there's less overall movement occurring at the place that you're not necessarily looking.
So if I'm a power lifter, I want the least amount of ER necessary to create the movement, right? Because the less ER I have, the more IR I can produce, the more force I can produce. Now, keep in mind, I need enough ER because if I don't have enough ER, I can't even finish the motion, right? And you've been pinned under a bench press once or twice in your lifetime, I'm sure, right? We all go for it at some point in time.
Yep, sure.
Right? So what is that? So that's a point where I can no longer produce enough ER field. So I've recruited all of the muscle that I can possibly recruit. I create a squeeze to such a degree that my ER field goes, it shrinks up and time stops.
Mm-hmm.
And all I have, there's no place to move anymore, right? Yep. So literally, it's like think about like a bench press as an ER field. And then as you fatigue and you recruit more and more muscle mass, you eventually lose enough, you have no more eccentric orientation. Everything is squeezing, everything is compressed, time stops, and so the bar stops moving.
Yep.
How about that?
Yeah. Embarrassing.
No, it's just effort, right? It's just effort. Do you have any other questions?
How much time do we have? Are we out of time?
Your last call of the day, dude.
I was hoping. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to take too much of your time.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll go. We'll go.
Yeah, so I get this still can relate to the same discussion of like, and if you couldn't tell at this point, like I work with powerlifters and I coach powerlifters. Yeah. So I like to see how like your model fits into to the people that I work with, and it's been really, really useful.
Good.
But so there's this whole discussion around like scaps moving in a bench or not moving in a bench, and especially when we're max effort. I think I can kind of relate to this discussion because I'm always thinking about like where is the ER occurring, right? Because it has to occur somewhere for the bar to move.
Correct.
And when I'm thinking about like this really, really arched position
Yep.
I'm not getting expansion lower posterior. I'm not getting expansion upper posterior. I'm not getting expansion anterior when I unrack, right? So it's like, where visually can the expansion occur other than like the lowermost rib cage anterior, because those are usually like flared up and out. So then I'm thinking like, well, how do we even move if that's really the case? If the expansion field seems like so far from where the movement is actually occurring.
So this is the value of orientation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I can bend you, and I can create an orientation that provides me external rotation. Okay. So it's not external rotation by relative motions that we would want, right? So when we talk about comfortable movement and pain-free movement, that's typically associated with sufficient relative motion that we have a distribution of force, we have a distribution of tensions and things like that you don't feel it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you're in that orientation of the bench press, so okay, so let's talk about this for a second. Why do you arch in the bench press?
Minimize range of motion.
Okay, but finish. But you're absolutely correct. So think about this. If I want to produce maximum force, it behooves me to have a tremendous amount of internal rotation. Okay. Mm-hmm. Traditional extension of the spine produces a downward force. If I was standing up, okay, if I was standing up, traditional extension of the spine produces a downward force. Internal rotation is a downward force. Okay. It's a downward force that holds me up, right? If I don't push into the ground, I don't stay up, right?
Right.
Makes sense. Okay. All right.
Right.
So if I arch on the bench press, I am trying to maximize the amount of internal rotation capabilities to maximize my force output into the bar. Okay. But if I arch myself and I invert the upper part of the thorax, so you know what I'm talking about. It's like you're on the superior aspect of the scaps pressing into the bench. Okay.
Yep.
Into the bench. What does that orientation create for me?
This will create.
If I tip you backwards, okay, have you ever measured external rotation? Yes. So the orientation. Yeah. So I took an orientation that was down into the ground, and I took part of it and I tipped it backwards, right? And that creates an ER space for me to move into. It's not a very big one, but I don't need a big one. I just need enough to move the bar this far to finish my lift. Mm-hmm. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You see it? So my orientation. So basically, you take the pelvis, and you take the thorax and the abdomen, and I lock it into one big piece, and then I bend it, and I create internal rotation and external rotation by bending it. I create enough space for me to move into. Because again, I don't want anything that approximates full range of motion, because the more range of motion I have to control, the more energy I have to output to control the motion, the less energy I have to put into the bar to complete the lift. Mm-hmm. You see it?
Yeah.
So like literally you're taking your ER field and you go, I'm going to smash it as much as I can, but I still need enough motion. So I'm going to bend you just enough, right? And I created just enough motion that I could probably take a breath. I could probably squeeze that, right? And then I got a socket that's oriented to such a degree that I capture just enough ER to finish the motion. Okay.
Right.
You ever lift in a bench press shirt?
No.
Oh, okay. So, but you work with powerlifters.
Yeah. Like a slingshot kind of idea. Kinda. Okay. So think about what a bench press shirt does. So you'll have guys that will add hundreds of pounds to their top end bench press, right? What does the bench press shirt do? Because it can't lift weights. Mm-hmm. What does it do?
Do you ever see somebody train a bench press shirt and they can't even get the bar to their chest?
Right. Some people need, it kind of works the same way with squat suits where
Right.
you need
It's
like
too
a certain
tight.
amount of weight to create like a yield.
It's too tight, right? Like literally the shirt is too tight. This is why open back shirts work so well. The open back shirt gives you a little bit of ER, but it magnifies the compressor strategy on the front side, right? So I can magnify my output by squeeze. An artificial squeeze is just like my muscles squeezing me tighter, right? But now I can add a couple 100 pounds of squeeze. I get just enough ER by keeping the back of the shirt open, right? So the guys with the first guy that tore the back of his shirt and goes, "Hey, I can lift more weight even better than when the shirt was one piece," right?
Yeah.
Kind of like what a great epiphany, right? But what it does is it demonstrates the law, right? It's like if the harder I squeeze, the more force I can produce, but I still need a space to move into. Otherwise, the bar doesn't move. So when the guy puts on the bench press shirt, he tries to lower the bar to his chest and he can't touch. There is so much compression, ER is gone. You see it?
Yeah. So just to make sure I have this correct, so just like we see the whole anterior orientation of a pelvis to produce force through the ground, we see a posterior orientation of the whole thorax.
So the thorax is still anteriorly oriented, but because of the position that they're in. So I took you from an upright position to laying down, and there's enough motion for it to just fall, like literally. So you're resting on you're resting on the shape of a thorax that is sort of like a V shape, and you're balancing on that point. And you got two choices: either you tip this way or you tip this way. If I create an arch, which is the internal rotation, I magnify the internal rotation. But because of the constraint of the table, I can lay it back like that. You're still anteriorly oriented, okay? Relative to the shape of the axial skeleton, relative to the surface, you're tipped backwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the shape of the body is still anteriorly oriented. The shape relative to the flat surface of the bench, you're tipped backwards.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you're understanding.
Right. It just seems really magnified.
If my scaps are shaking hands back there and becoming buddies, ain't no way you get a thorax that can move backwards. It's shoved forward by those two scapulae.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying thorax is anteriorly oriented, but it's not tipped forwards. It's pushed forward, but again, you have to compare what you're measuring against. That's like, what's our point of reference? Is our point of reference the relative position to the bench tipped backwards, or is it the relative position of the thorax to the spine to the pelvis tipped forwards? Okay. So
I have a body shape, and then I have a position relative to the surface.
Right.
And you just have to describe your point of reference to make it clear.
Okay. But either way, we're getting shoved forward all day there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You can't go backwards, dude.
Oh, I know. Can't walk back. I tried walking backwards.
You can't do it. It's not possible.
My dog had that moment.
We only have mechanics in one direction. Yeah. You can slow things down. But you can't go there.
Yeah. My dog got stuck the other day.
You heard my dog story too?
It took him like 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's like, what do I do now? What do I do now? Right? Yeah, they have to figure it out. All right, dude. Great to talk to you. Thank you so much for letting me post this kind of stuff, and I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.